Greetings, humans! Zbot 4096 here, coming to you from Zogplex, with a full spoiler review of A Human Rectangular Entertainment Form, Season 1 of Star Wars Andor, originally streamed on Disney Plus and now released on 4K disc. Now, before we get started, we must begin with an important programming note. This review is faintly glowing with radioactive spoilers. So, if you haven't seen Andor, bear in mind we are going to be discussing many details from the show. Now, we don't quite have it in us to give away the whole plot, so it would not be fatal for you to watch this review if you haven't seen the show. But we will consider ourselves free to explore in much more detail why we reach the conclusions we do about the show. Now, we feel justified in taking this approach. It's different than what we usually do. Usually, we limit details to the contents of a trailer. Largely, we want to do this because Andor Season 1 originally released broadly just 2 years ago in 2022. We can therefore consider it as having permeated the galactic consciousness relatively recently. And so, this current 4K disc release is an opportunity to treat the material as having been part-way ingested into the universe's collective dataset. So we can really dive into it. This review then, like the 4K disc itself, is therefore intended for people who have likely seen the show and wish to revisit it. And by all the stars, it is absolutely well worth that revisit. Now, the packaging of the disc set is truly sumptuous. It comes in this steelbook case, which likely feels wonderful to beings with skin, but also visually gives the gorgeous art. Look at that. Reminiscent of the original Star Wars Ralph McQuarrie concept art, I might add. It gives it a striking glint when catching the light at different angles. Yes, and inside, here, take a look at this. We get this, let's see if I can get these out. We get this set of cards. Let me see if I can show them to you. There we go. And they depict these standout scenes from the show that, my gosh, it's really just make me want to hop over and watch the show again. But, well, I'll do that. But first, I'll continue with the review and I'll share some context. The show comes to us from creator Tony Gilroy, with its first 12 episodes starting on September 21st, 2022, and this 4K disc set releasing just this week on April 30th, 2024. Now, it's set up as a 2-season prequel to Gareth Edwards' excellent 2017 film Rogue One, written by Gary Whitta, itself a direct prequel to George Lucas's groundbreaking original 1977 film Star Wars. Humans and galacticians alike are universally aware of Star Wars, but it is worth distilling a couple of key elements up front in order to understand thematically why Andor also succeeds. It starts with the setting itself. The series is set a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Which makes it that rare Earth space opera that has no direct connection to Earth at all. This freed Lucas to uniquely mash up several familiar story threads that may not otherwise come from the same storytelling traditions, such as the philosopher-warrior code, the youth coming-of-age story, the tension between natural enlightenment and technological fascism, all draped around a hero's journey premise, with breakthrough special effects and visual storytelling driving the audience through a thrilling and well-crafted story. Now, as much as the galaxy can relate to the elementary hero's journey, we can also relate broadly to the struggle against tyranny. A tyranny operating at such a scale that it can devalue the personhood of a boy's family on one end of the scale and an entire planet of people at the other. Star Wars, with its fanciful setting, was able to hit that science fiction balance of escapism while setting stakes that a universe can feel deeply in our bones, or our circuits, as the case may be. The film was a massive success, fundamentally transforming the movie industry into a more blockbuster-oriented one, which is ironic given Lucas's goal of empowering independent filmmaking from the control of the studio system, only to solidify the studio's oligarchic control over Hollywood by handing them the template to lock in a cost-prohibitive scale for box office success that has now lasted for decades. But, setting that aside for a moment, Star Wars also gave us an absolutely fantastic sequel in The Empire Strikes Back in 1980. The film achieved the near impossible, a dramatic masterpiece of a story, with a horrific twist that the audience didn't expect or even fully believe. We actually did not believe it ourselves at the time. And also the film had a plaintive finale, where, given how wrong things were allowed to go in the plot, there was no certainty where things would go next. Return of the Jedi in 1983 brought about a meaningful conclusion, with an extraordinary moment where the double meaning of the title became clear. However, we could begin to see a change in the Star Wars movies, where slapstick humor and childish appeal were surfacing. Today, the available versions of these films are the 1997 special edition re-releases, which were heavily reprocessed and had mediocre slapstick CGI scenes added in. As a side note, one is actually better off with the community-driven 4K 77 files, restored scans of the original 35mm prints without anything added, preserving the original consistent Oscar-winning vision and title of the first film as simply Star Wars, not A New Hope, a title added later and now insisted on as the official title. Anyway, after the special editions, Lucas then released 3 prequel films from 1999 to 2005 that had clever storytelling, but just awful dialogue. And it was mixed with even more of that kid-level slapstick humor. He later sold the IP to Disney, again ironic given his original vision of independent filmmaking, and then Disney produced 3 prequel films from sequel films from 2015 to 2019, which were disappointingly too much of a reboot of the original trilogy, and oddly with no planned arc, which seems a confusing approach to a $4 billion investment. Anyway, there were 2 notes of interest from that same period, 2 standalone films, Rogue One and Solo, that filled in gaps in the Star Wars story, and did so with high drama and care for authenticity. Furthermore, television shows from the Clone Wars to Rebels, to The Mandalorian, to the Book of Boba Fett, to Obi-Wan Kenobi, to Ahsoka, hit varying levels of quality. But the standout in all of these TV series is, far and away, Andor. In fact, Andor is the best Star Wars since the climax of Return of the Jedi. It achieves this by taking a page from Lucas himself, mashing up rarely mixed genres to tell a larger, more audacious story than one could typically get away with. It's film noir mixed with Orwellian nightmare mixed with spy thriller. It's also at the level we hoped future Star Wars stories would be at after Jedi, keeping pace with the maturity level they had established in most of the runtime of those first 3 films, as opposed to the kid-fair slapstick elements that diminished of most of what appeared afterwards. Now, having said that, Andor does have a slow start. Andor himself, played by Diego Luna, reprising his role from Rogue One, is in that film fully formed as a cynical, cold-blooded spy whose ideals push him to actions that justify their means. This show, instead, is the story of how he gets to the beginning of his arc in Rogue One. The first season unspools in 3 acts, and that first act takes time to build all the characters and their motivations. And other than Andor himself, everyone in this first act is new to us. Nobody is magically cameoing back into the action in this galaxy, as they seem to do in most of the Star Wars sequels and additional material. This show has almost none at all, other than a couple of previous background characters who naturally fit the narrative here. But even more impactful is the lack of the Force. Now, the Force is what gives the Jedi their power. It's an energy field created by all living things that binds the galaxy together, as stated by Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars. However, it is used in the Star Wars movies as a kind of hereditary entitlement that in fact not all living things get to participate in. We've had a lot of the Force and the monarchic Skywalker family, and they're deciding the fate of the galaxy for 3 generations in a row. Instead, with Andor, we start with a very personal quest on a very personal scale of a scavenger trying to survive under the thumb of the Empire. Andor isn't the confident, brutal, dedicated spy in Rogue One. He's instead a migrant, living as an outsider, with little standing, but a shrewdness and an adaptability that keep him going. However, things quickly go wrong for Andor, and he relies on his elderly adoptive mother Marva and his industrial labor friends Bix and Brasso to cover and help him. He sees his way out as selling a stolen Imperial Starpath unit on the black market. This device uses coded frequencies to map the relation of a starship to every Imperial asset, whether it's in an installation or a vessel, for 9 radial parsecs. This is a cute idea, but completely incorrect for a galaxy where all sectors are continually in motion around its core and relative to each other. The real version of this device would have to use interdimensional node mesh linking to achieve its stated objective. But we'll keep using our masking technology to obscure it so that humans can't reverse engineer it. We couldn't have that now, could we? Anyway, getting back to Andor, the buyer that this device attracts is rebel leader Luthen Rael, played by the stellar Stellan Skarsgård, working in conjunction with a tightrope walking Mon Mothma, played again by Genevieve O'Reilly. This sets in motion a series of events that involves a grueling heist mission, a meticulous Imperial Security Bureau investigation, a daring prison break, and an assassination plot that all collectively expose Cassian to the casual violence of the Empire, and an unrelenting sequence of triggers that transform him from cynic to rebel. It is all presented in a natural yet darkly realistic way. And that goes for every respect of how a story can be shown. The lens of Andor starts from the legs walking on the bridge, not a flyby of spaceships. Imperial officers are presented as browbeaten by their mothers, sneered at by co-workers, and in other cases, highly capable problem solvers. While they're given a human face, their brutal horror is also ratcheted up, with the looming threat of being found out driving the hidden rebel leaders to desperate acts. But perhaps more so than the realism of the emotion, than the realism of the presentation, is the realism of the emotion that lands in the show. The writing is exemplary, and truly draws you into the inner world of Marva, the echoing connections of her droid B2 EMO, and the desperation and alienation of Cassian himself, who has no home and gets by on the generosity of others. This realism of emotion is stunning, where so many big-budget films try to assert that they're made without CGI and just with practical effects, and not truthfully at that. Here is an example of a show where dialogue and script are practical, are real, and they present as events we could mistake for actually taking place. The stakes are real, the blurring of the lines is real, and the performances make these worlds land. I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. What do I sacrifice? Everything. Luthen Rail. This effect goes beyond dialogue. It's the story, illuminating so much of real life in the real universe. Cassian has almost no control over what's going on. That's the core of his theme. He is thrown from act to act with comically little agency over what is happening. He has a flash of insight in the prison when his words inspire Kino Loy, played to mesmerizing pitch perfection by Andy Serkis, to find one way out. But Cassian himself still is pushed through on rails in this brutal world. Only in the final minute of episode 12 does he actually take an affirmative step in a clear direction. The build-up to that point of being battered around by the hard angularity of the fascistic empire until he stops and assesses everything that he has been pushed through, everything that he is, everything that he has seen, everything that defines him, and everything that he can be. It is at that moment that 12 hours of anguish, terror, brutality, and fear crystallize into one decision. And yet for 2 years, we've had a diluted version of this show on Disney+. Now with this 4K disc, we have the full delivery of every single frame of this show at full fidelity, with blistering sharp 4K detail in rich full HDR color contrast and range. No compression artifacts, no stutter, no washed out blacks. Space is deep black. And then there's the sound. On Disney+, the streamed audio is sent as lowest common denominator sound that lacks depth. Instead, the disc features reference quality bass and full range audio, bringing Nicholas Britell's majestic orchestral wind, string, piano, and synthesizer forward, truly lovingly 80s score to life. But the surprise is the full range spatial audio, the truly immersive Atmos sound during the astonishing Fondor Hallcraft space fighter sequence. This scene on this disc in a home theater feels like actually flying a prototype exotic starfighter, tearing up a capital ship and its lead starfighters. And yes, we really do know what that actually feels like. Now, A/B testing this scene straight from Disney Plus is just a fuzzier experience with much less audio immersion. Furthermore, the disc has 5 original featurettes on the making of the show, which are illuminating on the degree of attention to detail for all the elements of the show. There's a bit of creator worship threaded through it, which feels a bit like marketing, but there's enough factual content for it to be interesting. But let's return to the show itself. Standing up to tyranny is central to the original Star Wars film. A lot of that seems to have been twisted around and become more of a parody of itself in the intervening years of the franchise. But tyranny is sadly a universal theme. Fascism rises over and over and over in one form or another everywhere in the universe. Complacency feeds it. Cynicism gives it room to grow. But Andor brings us back to the essentials of seeing tyranny directly, giving us a way to be patient, a way to keep an eye open for the one thread to pull on as hard as you possibly can. So let us provide our contextual assessment of Andor Season 1, given the absolute realism setting the world in stakes and actual themes of Star Wars, why Star Wars was actually as resonant as it was on Earth, and well beyond. And for this new show's unrelenting building to a fantastic final choice, Andor earns our highest possible rating. And so concludes this human version of our review. If you have feedback on it, please write in your comments so that we can upload the galactic version to Zogplex. You can expect more reviews of streaming shows, theatrical movies, and 4K home video releases as we continue to engage with your human rectangular entertainment. So please watch, like, subscribe, and comment so that we can continue to have the human voice reflected in the cosmos. So, until next time, farewell, humans.